The rain began before dusk, but by nightfall it had turned into a furious downpour that swallowed the desert whole. The wind screamed across the plains, bending the mesquite trees and thrashing at the shutters of the small cabin on Dead Horse Ridge. Inside, Evelyn Rowe pressed her hand against the window pane. Watching sheets of water blur the world into a ghostly haze, she'd lived through many storms. But this one felt different, wild, almost alive. As if the sky itself was mourning something long lost, her small cabin creaked under the weight of the storm. The roof leaked near the hearth, and drops pattered into a tin bucket beside the fire. Evelyn sat with her mending basket, trying to ignore the loneliness that came with nights like this. It had been 3 years since her husband disappeared into the mountains searching for gold. The town said he died in some drunken brawl, but Evelyn never believed it. She'd stopped listening to gossip and stopped visiting town altogether. Out here, silence was her only companion, and silence didn't lie. A gust of wind slammed against the door. Then came the faint sound of hooves splashing through mud, slow, uneven, then a heavy thud. Evelyn's head shot up. No one traveled through this ridge in weather like this. She took her lantern, its dim light flickering wildly, and opened the door. The storm met her like a wall. Rain soaked her instantly, cold and stinging. The wind tore at her shawl as she stepped out onto the porch, peering into the black night. Lightning split the sky, and in that blinding flash, she saw him. A man collapsed face first in the mud near her fence. Evelyn's heart raced. She rushed forward, the mud sucking at her boots, rain hammering her shoulders. The lantern swayed dangerously in her hand. When she reached him, she saw his horse lying nearby, trembling, too weak to stand. The man was half naked, wearing only torn leather trousers and a blood-soaked strap across his shoulder. His hair, long and black as the night, was tangled with rain and dirt. His face was strong, sharp jawline, high cheekbones, the mark of a proud people. He was Apache. She froze, breath caught between fear and compassion. Stories of raids and killings had filled every tavern from Prescott to Tucson. Yet here, in her yard, was not a warrior of terror, just a dying man, soaked and shivering. "Lord help me," she muttered, setting the lantern down beside him. She pressed her fingers to his neck. He was alive, but barely. The rain ran red as it washed over his wound. Without another thought, she gripped his arm and pulled. He was heavy-strung even in weakness. The storm roared around them, and for every step she took, the mud seemed to drag her back. Thunder shook the ridge as she hauled him toward the porch. Twice she slipped, falling to her knees, her hands coated in mud and blood. "Come on," she whispered through clenched teeth. "You're not dying out here." Lightning flashed again, lighting his face, and for a brief moment she saw his eyes flicker open. Dark, fierce eyes that met hers with a mixture of confusion and pain before rolling shut again. She got him inside at last, the door slamming behind her as the wind screamed outside. Evelyn dragged him near the fire, her breath ragged. The warmth of the flames met the chill of his soaked skin. Steam rose from his body, his chest rising shallowly. She quickly fetched water and bandages, cutting away the wet leather. The wound was deep but clean, a gunshot, likely from a Winchester rifle. Carefully, she washed the blood away, her fingers trembling each time his muscles flinched beneath her touch. When she pressed a cloth to the wound, he groaned softly, his voice rough and deep. "Why? You help?" She looked into his fevered eyes. "Because no one deserves to die alone in the rain." He stared at her for a heartbeat before slipping back into unconsciousness. Outside, the storm raged harder, as though punishing the earth for some forgotten sin. Evelyn tossed more wood into the fire and sat beside him, listening to the rhythm of rain on the roof. Her clothes clung to her, heavy and wet, but she didn't care. Something about the man stirred a strange ache in her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. When dawn finally crept across the mountains, the rain still hadn't stopped. And inside that cabin, two strangers shared the same fragile silence, the kind that precedes a story neither of them could have ever imagined. The storm hadn't eased by morning. Instead, it had settled into a steady, heavy rhythm that soaked the earth and blurred the horizon into gray. The cabin smelled of wet wood, smoke, and blood. Evelyn sat by the fire, her shawl draped over her shoulders, eyes fixed on the man sleeping on her cot. He stirred at last. His breathing deepened, and his fingers twitched before his dark eyes opened. They were sharp, like an eagle's, but dulled by pain and exhaustion. Evelyn set down her cup of coffee and moved closer. "You're awake," she said softly. He tried to sit up, but pain gripped him, and he groaned, pressing a hand to his shoulder. The bandage she'd tied there was already stained. Evelyn reached out instinctively, but he flinched at her touch. "You're safe here," she assured him. "You've been shot, but the bullet's out." His voice came low and rough. "You took it out?" "I did," she replied. "It was either that or watch you die in the mud." For a long moment he stared at her, unreadable. Then he nodded faintly. "You should not help men like me." Evelyn frowned. "Men like you?" "Apache," he said simply, his tone flat but heavy. She looked into his eyes, her voice steady. "You were bleeding. The rain didn't care who you were." That seemed to quiet him. He lay back, staring up at the wooden beams above, listening to the rain pound the roof. His breathing slowed, and for the first time she saw something beyond his guardedness. Exhaustion, maybe sorrow. "What's your name?" she asked. After a pause, he answered, "Koa." She repeated it under her breath, letting the name settle in her mind like a secret. "Koa, I'm Evelyn Rowe." He gave no reply, just turned his head slightly toward the fire, the flames reflected in his eyes. His gaze lingered on her, the pale curve of her face lit by firelight, strands of damp hair sticking to her cheek. There was strength there, but also loneliness. Hours passed with only the sound of rain between them. Evelyn changed his bandage, made him tea, and tried to warm his chilled skin with blankets. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words carried weight. "You live here alone?" "I do," she said. 3 years now. No husband?" Her hands paused. "He's gone." Koa's eyes moved to her hands, small, scarred, and rough from work. "You wait for him?" "I used to." She looked toward the window, where the rain streaked down like tears. "Now I just wait for the rain to stop." He nodded slowly, as if he understood a language beyond words. "Rain doesn't stop," he murmured. "It just moves from one sky to another." That sentence stayed in her mind longer than it should have. She poured him more tea, and as he drank, she studied the tattoos that wrapped faintly around his forearm, geometric lines, faded but proud. She wondered what they meant. By nightfall, the wind picked up again, moaning through the chimney. Evelyn threw another log on the fire. The room glowed gold and amber. She caught Koa watching the flames like they held memories he couldn't touch. "You came far," she said quietly. He nodded once. "Soldiers came through canyon land. Took horses. Took land." His voice hardened, jaw tightening. "I took bullet. Ran south." Her chest tightened. "You're safe here," she said again, though she wasn't sure it was true. Outlaws, soldiers, or bounty hunters could come looking. The thought made her stomach twist. Koa's gaze drifted to her again. "Why you not afraid?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe I am. But I've been alone long enough to know fear doesn't keep you warm." That made him smirk, barely a curve of his lips, but real. It changed his face entirely, softening the warrior into something human, something she couldn't look away from. Outside, thunder rolled once more, and the storm grew wild again. Evelyn rose to shut the window, but a gust of wind burst it open, sending rain splashing across the floor. She gasped as cold drops hit her face. Koa, despite his wound, pushed himself upright and reached out, his strong hand catching the shutter before it slammed her fingers. For a heartbeat, they stood close, her breath catching at the nearness of him. His skin glistened in the dim firelight, rain dripping from his hair. Their eyes met, hers wide with surprise, his deep and unreadable, yet gentler now. "Thank you," she whispered. He only nodded, closing the shutter tight. Rainwater ran down his chest, glimmering like silver. Evelyn handed him a towel, and when his fingers brushed hers, the warmth of his touch startled her. Outside, the storm raged endlessly, but inside that small cabin, something softer began to stir, something neither of them had expected to find in a world carved by pain and thunder. The rain had brought a stranger to her door, and though she didn't know it yet, that same rain would soon wash away everything she thought she knew about love, loss, and fate. The storm didn't stop. For 3 nights it wept over the land as if the sky itself was grieving. Each dawn came gray and heavy, each night darker than the one before. But inside the cabin, something had changed. Evelyn could no longer call Koa a stranger. His presence filled the silence in ways the fire never could. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of earth and wind, deep and calm, though the pain behind it was unmistakable. On the 3rd evening, the wind howled through the chimney again. Evelyn stirred a pot of stew over the fire, glancing back at Koa, who sat propped against the wall, cleaning the knife she'd given him. His wound was healing slowly. The fever had broken, but the shadows in his eyes hadn't. "Storm's holding," she said, half to herself. "I can't remember the last time it rained this long." Koa's gaze lifted toward the window, where rivulets of water streaked the glass. "The sky grieves," he said softly. "Sometimes for the land. Sometimes for us." His words made her pause. "For us?" He nodded slightly. "Everything carries memory. The mountains, the rain, even the earth beneath. When too much blood falls on it, the sky cries for balance." Evelyn turned back to the fire, her chest tight. She didn't ask what kind of blood he meant. She already knew. They ate in silence, listening to the rain drum against the roof. Every now and then, thunder rolled far off in the hills, echoing through the valley. When the bowl in her hands was empty, she caught him watching her again, not with suspicion, but with a quiet intensity that unsettled her. "You've lived alone too long," he said suddenly. She blinked, startled. "What makes you think that?" He gestured around the room, the empty chair, the unwashed cup on the shelf, the worn photograph by the mantel of a man in a miner's hat. "Your home remembers him," he said. "But you stopped living when he didn't come back." His words cut through her like a blade. She wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the bowl. "You don't know anything about me," she whispered. "I know silence," he said quietly. "And I know the kind that lives in you." The fire popped, throwing sparks. For a long time, neither spoke. Outside, the storm pressed against the cabin like a living thing, testing the walls, the windows, the strength of 2 souls caught in its mercy. Finally, Evelyn rose and went to the door. She needed air. The moment she opened it, rain splashed across her face, cool and sharp. The smell of wet earth filled her lungs. She stepped out onto the porch, the storm wrapping around her like an old memory. Behind her, Koa's voice came low, cautious. "You shouldn't be out there. The ground's soft. It'll swallow you whole." "I've been swallowed before," she murmured. Barely audible over the storm. Koa stood in the doorway then, the firelight behind him outlining his figure, tall, strong, bare-chested. his dark hair glistening with drops of rain that clung like silver beads. He stepped into the rain beside her, ignoring the wound that pulled at his shoulder. The thunder cracked. Evelyn turned, startled. "You shouldn't," but he was already looking up, eyes closed, letting the rain wash over him. His voice came soft, almost like prayer. "This storm will end." They always do. But before it does, something always changes. Evelyn stood beside him, the rain soaking them both. The world was gray and endless, and yet, for the first time in years, she felt alive. The cold rain on her face reminded her of what it meant to feel anything at all when lightning lit the ridge. She caught his expression, not of pain or pride, but peace. And she realized he wasn't just a wounded man. He was a survivor of something larger than himself. Then, from the distance, another sound pierced the rhythm of rain, a faint, echoing neigh. Horses. More than one. Koa's body tensed immediately. "Get inside," he said sharply. "What is it?" He turned toward the open plain, eyes narrowing. "Soldiers." Her heart skipped. "How can you tell?" "Hoofbeats don't lie," he murmured. "They follow blood." Evelyn froze, rain dripping from her lashes. In that instant, she understood. Whoever shot Koa hadn't stopped hunting him. He stepped back into the cabin, grabbed his knife, and checked the bandage one last time. "If they find me here," he said slowly, "they will not let you live either." Evelyn's throat went dry. "Then we don't let them find you." Their eyes met, her fear against his fire, and the storm roared louder, as if the heavens themselves were warning them both. Before the rain stopped, someone else would bleed. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in the soaked earth and trembling air. The night hummed with the low growl of thunder fading over the distant ridge. Evelyn Rose stood by the cabin window, her heart racing as she spotted dust clouds rising from the south trail. Riders, too many of them, soldiers. She turned quickly to Koa, who sat on the floor near the hearth, cleaning the edge of a stone blade. His hair long, black, and wet from the rain hung across his shoulders, gleaming in the flicker of firelight. The tribal necklaces on his chest caught the glow, each bead telling a story she couldn't yet understand. "They're coming," she whispered. "Bluecoats. Maybe 6, maybe more." Koa looked up. His face remained calm, though his jaw tightened for a breath. "They hunt," he said simply. His English was still broken, but his meaning was clear. Evelyn's stomach twisted. "They're looking for you, aren't they?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he rose slowly, the full strength of his body revealed beneath the dim light. He reached for a worn leather strap and tied his knife to his belt. "If they find me here, they burn your house," he said. "And take you too." Evelyn's lips parted, fear catching in her throat. "Then we'll hide." "There's a cave beyond the ridge." Koa shook his head. "No, they know every rock." "I stay, you leave." His voice carried a certainty that stung her chest. She moved closer, shaking her head. "I'm not leaving you. I saw what you did for that boy in town, the one they accused you of hurting. You carried him to the doctor. I know you're not what they say." Koa's eyes darkened. The flickering flame caught the faint scars that lined his shoulders and back marks of whips, old bullets, and burned trails. "They killed my brother," he said quietly. "Then they said I killed their man." Lies travel faster than truth. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. She reached out, hesitating before touching the faint scar on his arm. "Then we fight the lies," she whispered. He turned toward her fully, his hand brushing her wrist, gentle but firm. "You have heart," he said, his voice low. "But heart can die if not hidden." Before she could answer, a sudden shout split the air outside. Horses. Boots hitting the ground. The clank of rifles being unshouldered. Evelyn's heart lurched. "They're here," she breathed. Koa moved swiftly, dousing the lamp and dragging the table toward the back wall. "Go through the hatch," he whispered. He lifted a wooden trapdoor she'd never noticed before. It led into a narrow passage beneath the cabin, used long ago for storing supplies. "Stay low." "No sound. What about you?" she asked. He didn't answer. He only gave her one look, fierce, protective, almost sorrowful. Then he shut the hatch behind her, just as fists hammered the front door. From below, Evelyn could hear everything: the splinter of wood, the stomp of boots, the harsh voices of soldiers. One barked in order, and something heavy crashed. "Where is he?" A man shouted. "We tracked his prints to this cabin." Evelyn covered her mouth, tears stinging her eyes. She heard Koa's voice, steady, calm. "I came for food." "Nothing more. Food, huh?" Another voice sneered. Funny for a man who murdered a scout in Red Valley. There was a crash, a scuffle. Then silence followed by the dull thud of a blow. Evelyn's heart stopped. She could bear it no longer. She pushed the hatch open just an inch, peering into the chaos above. Two soldiers held Koa by the arms, blood running down his lip. Even beaten, he stood tall, his muscles taut, his head unbowed. "Hang him by dawn," the officer ordered coldly. Evelyn's breath came in shallow bursts. Her mind screamed against what she was seeing. As they dragged Koa toward the door, his eyes met hers for a heartbeat, just a flicker, just enough for her to know he'd seen her. And somehow, in that moment, he smiled. Not in defeat, but in faith. She bit her fist to stop a cry from escaping. The soldiers left, their voices fading with the rumble of hooves. The cabin grew silent again, save for the rain dripping from the roof. Evelyn emerged slowly, trembling, her heart breaking and burning all at once. She stared at the open door and whispered into the empty night, "I'll bring you back, Koa. I swear it." Outside, the moon broke through the storm clouds, silver light falling over the empty trail marking the path she would soon take. The night bled into dawn, the world soaked in silver beneath a storm-gray sky. Evelyn Rose saddled her mare with trembling hands, her breath fogging in the cold air. The soldiers had taken Koa hours ago, dragged him toward Fort Tannen, a day's ride through the canyon. They thought she wouldn't dare follow. They didn't know her heart yet. She rode hard, the rain turning the trail to rivers of mud. Water splashed her skirts and plastered her hair to her face, but she didn't care. Every hoofbeat pounded with his name, Koa, Koa, the memory of his eyes, the calm. Strength, even as they struck him, burned behind her eyelids. By midday, she reached the ridge overlooking Red Valley, where the soldiers' campfire smoke curled upward in the distance. She dismounted and hid her horse among the rocks. The valley below was alive with tents, flags, and the gleam of metal. And there, tied to a post near the largest tent, stood Koa. He was stripped to the waist, wrists bound with coarse rope. His hair fell across his face, wet and tangled. Even beaten and bloodied, he looked unbroken. The sun broke through the clouds for a fleeting second, lighting the beads and bone on his chest, a quiet defiance. Evelyn bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. She crouched low, scanning the camp. There were at least 15 soldiers, maybe more. A frontal rescue was impossible. But she had one advantage: the storm hadn't left yet. Clouds still rumbled above, ready to break again. She waited until dusk. The first drops began to fall, soft as whispers on the earth. Then she moved. Keeping low, she crept through the tall grass toward the camp's edge. Her heart pounded louder than the thunder. The soldiers were laughing, drinking, their guard lowered as the storm deepened. She reached the corral, slipped past the tethered horses, and found the wagon loaded with supplies, rope, blankets, a small knife. She grabbed the knife, her hands shaking but sure. Then she crawled toward Koa. When she was close enough to see the bruises on his jaw, she whispered, "Koa." "It's me." His head lifted slightly, disbelief flickering in his dark eyes. "You should not be here," he whispered back, voice rough. "I told you I wouldn't leave," she said fiercely. "I'm getting you out." Lightning cracked across the valley, blinding white. In that flash, she cut the first rope around his wrists. But a shout erupted from behind them. "Hey, who's there?" Evelyn froze. A soldier stumbled toward them, lantern swinging. Koa moved faster than she could blink, grabbing the man's throat with his free hand and silencing him before he could fire. Evelyn's pulse thundered. "Run," he said. Together, they dashed toward the trees at the edge of the camp. Bullets ripped through the rain, sparks lighting the dark. Horses screamed, men shouted. The storm turned wild, sheets of water blinding every shot. Evelyn's skirts snagged on a bush, and Koa lifted her effortlessly, half carrying her through the mud until they reached the cover of the pines. They collapsed behind a fallen log, breathless and soaked. Rain poured down their faces. Evelyn turned to him, her hands still trembling. "You're bleeding," she whispered. He smiled faintly, a streak of mud across his cheek. "You ride like thunder," he murmured. She almost laughed, the sound breaking through her tears. "And you fight like it." He reached for her hand. His fingers were rough, warm despite the cold. "They will follow," he said. "But I know a way through the canyon, my father's path. If we reach it before dawn, we live." Evelyn nodded, gripping his hand tighter. "Then lead the way." They moved deeper into the forest, their silhouettes swallowed by rain and darkness. Behind them, the shouts of soldiers echoed faintly, fading with every step. The storm became their cover and their bond. As they reached the ridge overlooking the Black Canyon, Koa stopped. He turned to her, rain sliding down his chest, his hair plastered against his shoulders. "If we go forward," he said quietly, "there is no going back to your world." Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "My world ended the moment they took you." For a moment, neither spoke. The storm raged around them, wind, rain, thunder all swirling like fate itself. Then Koa lifted his hand to her face, tracing the raindrops on her cheek. And under the roaring sky, she kissed him soft, trembling, full of everything that words couldn't hold. The world felt like it stopped for a single heartbeat. Then he whispered against her lips, "We ride now." And they did into the thunder, two souls bound by rain, by danger, by something that could never be undone. The storm faded to a cold mist as dawn broke over the canyon rim. Evelyn's body ached from the night's flight, but she didn't stop. Koa led the way, silent and sure-footed, moving like the land itself. The path was narrow, carved between cliffs of red stone and dark pines dripping from the rain. Evelyn followed close behind, her skirts torn, her boots heavy with mud. "Are we almost there?" she asked, her breath fogging in the chill. Koa nodded. "Few more steps." The canyon hides its heart well. When they turned the bend, she saw it a vast hollow carved by time and water, hidden from the world. The first rays of sunlight touched its edges, turning the mist into gold. In the center stood ancient stone pillars covered in painted symbols. A waterfall trickled from the cliffside into a clear pool below. Evelyn froze, breathless. "It's beautiful." Koa's eyes softened. "My people once called this home. Now only the wind remembers." He stepped into the clearing, kneeling by the pool. His fingers traced the water as if greeting something sacred. Evelyn watched the strength in his movements, the quiet reverence in the way he looked at this forgotten place. But peace never stayed long in their world. The distant echo of gunfire rolled through the canyon. Evelyn's heart lurched. "They're following," she whispered. Koa stood, scanning the rim. "They move fast. Too fast." His jaw tightened. They know the path. Someone told them. Who? Evelyn asked. He looked toward the north, where the trail curved toward the open desert. A man who once rode with me. Tanner Holt. He was my brother in the army until he turned their guns on my family. The truth hit her like a storm. You served with them? Koa nodded. I thought peace could be made. But peace dies easy when men crave land. His voice darkened. When they came for my people, Tanner fired first. I survived. He told them I murdered one of theirs to hide what he did. Evelyn's chest tightened. And now he's hunting you to finish the lie. Koa's eyes met hers, fierce and steady. Not if truth rides first. He walked toward the horses tethered under the trees. Evelyn followed, determination hardening in her heart. They rode along the canyon floor, hooves splashing through the shallow river. The air smelled of wet sage and pine. Every turn echoed with their breaths and the distant thunder of pursuit. When they reached a narrow pass, Koa stopped. They will be here soon. We make a stand here, he said. Evelyn's pulse raced. You can't fight them all, he turned to her, rain still dripping from his hair, his voice calm. I don't fight for blood. I fight for truth. He pressed something into her hand, a carved bone pendant strung with turquoise. My mother's, he said quietly. If I fall, you carry the truth to Red Valley. Show them this. Tell them what happened here. Evelyn shook her head, tears mixing with the rain. Don't you dare talk like that. He smiled faintly, his hand brushing her cheek. You came through fire and storm for me. I will not let that be in vain. The first rifle crack split the air. Bullets hit the rock behind them. Koa turned, drawing his knife and crouching low. He moved like a shadow, silent, powerful, every motion deliberate. Evelyn grabbed the fallen rifle from the ground and fired once, the recoil nearly knocking her back. The shot hit its mark, one of the riders fell. Koa looked back at her in surprise, a fierce grin spreading across his face. You fight like thunder again, he said. They fought side by side as the sun rose higher. Rain turned to steam on the canyon walls. Smoke filled the air. The sound of gunfire echoed between the cliffs like drums of war. When the last echo faded, only silence remained. The surviving soldiers fled, leaving their dead behind. Evelyn stood panting, her hair wild, smoke curling around her face. Koa leaned on a rock, blood seeping from a wound on his shoulder. Evelyn rushed to him. You're hurt. He winced but smiled through it. It is small, he said. I've carried worse. She tore a piece of her skirt and pressed it against the wound. You're not dying on me, Koa. He looked at her, really looked, as if seeing her soul. Then I live for you, he said softly. Her hands trembled as she bound the cloth. The storm clouds drifted apart, sunlight spilling through the mist like a blessing. Around them, the canyon glowed red, gold, alive. Koa took her hand. The wind carries our story now, he murmured. Evelyn met his gaze, her heart steady for the first time since that stormy night. Then let it remember our names. And as the wind swept through the canyon, carrying the scent of rain and gunpowder, two hearts once strangers stood bound by love, by truth, and by the land itself. The sun hung low over the canyon, its light bleeding gold across the scarred earth. The battle was over, but the quiet carried weight. Smoke drifted upward, mingling with the scent of wet dust and gunpowder. Evelyn sat beside Koa, pressing a cool cloth to his shoulder, her hands trembling with exhaustion and relief. You should rest, she whispered. Koa's gaze lifted toward the sky. Rest comes when the truth walks free. His voice was calm, but there was something distant in it, like thunder fading over a far horizon. Evelyn frowned. What truth? We've already beaten them. Before he could answer, the sound of hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. One rider, slow, steady. The wind shifted, and from the trail emerged Tanner Holt, dusty, scarred, his rifle across his saddle. The man looked every bit like the ghost of Koa's past. Evelyn rose quickly, her heart hammering. Koa stood too, despite his wound, the morning light glinting off his tribal beads. His long black hair stirred in the breeze, strands catching in the sunlight like threads of midnight. "So it's true," Tanner called out, dismounting. "You're still breathing." Koa's voice stayed low, steady. "You came to finish what you started." Tanner smirked, eyes flicking toward Evelyn. "I came to clean my record. They'll call me a hero again when they find your body." Evelyn stepped in front of Koa, anger trembling in her voice. "You're no hero. You murdered his brother and blamed him for it." "I know the truth now." Tanner's jaw tightened. "You don't know a thing about truth, lady. You think you can hide behind a savage?" Lightning flashed somewhere far off, though the sky was clear. A strange, heavy silence fell between them. Koa's hand lowered to his knife, the movement slow, deliberate. "The land hears lies," he said, "and it buries them." Tanner raised his rifle. "Then it'll bury you too." The moment snapped. Tanner fired. Koa moved before Evelyn could scream, rolling aside, the bullet grazing his arm. In one fluid motion, he lunged forward, the blade of his knife flashing. The two men collided with a force that shook the dust from the rocks. Tanner fought viciously, but Koa was faster, his muscles coiled like the storm he'd survived. Evelyn stood frozen, rain beginning to fall again in soft scattered drops, as if the sky couldn't bear to watch. Tanner struck, but Koa caught his wrist, twisting the rifle away. They grappled in the mud, breaths harsh, movements raw. Then one last swing, Koa's knife caught Tanner's chest. The gunman staggered back, eyes wide. He fell to his knees, the rifle slipping from his grasp. "You should have stayed dead," Tanner rasped, and collapsed onto the wet ground. Silence followed. Only the rain spoke. Koa stood over him, chest heaving, water running down his face like tears that weren't his own. Evelyn moved to him, her hands finding his shoulders. "It's over," she whispered. "You're free now." He looked at her, and in that gaze was both pain and peace. "Freedom costs the blood of ghosts," he said softly. The rain thickened, washing away the tracks of the fight. Koa turned toward the canyon's mouth, the wind carrying the faint call of an eagle overhead. "My people believe the rain remembers all things," he said. "Maybe it remembers me too." Evelyn stepped closer, her hand on his chest. "Then it will remember us both." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried a lifetime inside it. "You could go back," he said. "Your world still waits." She shook her head, tears blending with the rain. "My world was empty until that storm brought you to my door." Koa reached into his pouch and pulled out a small carved token, the same bone pendant he'd once given her. He tied it gently around her neck, his fingers lingering there. "Then the rain bound our souls," he whispered. They stood together as thunder rolled once more across the valley, not angry now, but deep and alive, like the heartbeat of the earth. The storm softened into a drizzle. The canyon, washed clean, glowed beneath the sunset, red, gold, and endless. Evelyn rested her head against his shoulder. "Where will we go?" "Where the land is still wild," he said. "Where rain still remembers love." And so they left the canyon, two figures walking side by side into the fading light, leaving behind the ghosts, the lies, and the world that tried to tear them apart. As night fell, the first stars broke through the clouds. The wind whispered through the canyons and pines, carrying with it the story of a woman and an Apache warrior who found love in a storm, and a promise that no rain would ever forget their names.